The Assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, 1968. Chapter 1. Midnight in Los Angeles. It was just after midnight on June 5, 1968, and the ballroom of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles pulsed with energy. Thousands of supporters had gathered to hear Senator Robert F. Kennedy, younger brother of the slain President John F. Kennedy, declare victory in the California Democratic primary. Kennedy had just stepped onto the stage, his voice strong but humble, thanking the crowd and promising hope. Now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. The room erupted in applause. To many, it felt like history was repeating itself, another Kennedy destined for the White House. But history had darker plans. Minutes later, RFK and his entourage moved through the hotel's narrow kitchen pantry, a shortcut meant to avoid the packed ballroom. Supporters followed, shouting his name, trying to touch his hand. Kennedy smiled, shaking hands, basking in the glow of victory. Then, gunfire. Shots rang out in the cramped hallway. Panic exploded as screams filled the air. Robert F. Kennedy collapsed, blood pooling beneath his head. A young busboy named Juan Romero cradled him, his white shirt stained with the senator's blood. In the chaos, a man was wrestled to the ground, Sirhan Sirhan, a 24-year-old Palestinian immigrant. In his hand, the smoking .22 revolver used to fire the fatal shots. The crowd was in shock. America was in shock. Another Kennedy, another bright light, struck down by bullets. But was Sirhan Sirhan truly the lone assassin? Or just the trigger man in a much bigger conspiracy? Chapter 2. Rise of a Reluctant Leader. Robert Francis Kennedy, Bobby to the nation, was not born in the shadow of his famous brother John. He carved his own path through sheer determination and grit. Born in 1925, RFK was the seventh child of the Kennedy dynasty. Unlike his glamorous brother Jack, Robert was quieter, more intense, and often underestimated. But behind the boyish face and sharp eyes was a man of relentless willpower. As Attorney General in the early 1960s, RFK became one of the most powerful men in America. He waged war on organized crime, sending mob bosses to prison and dismantling criminal networks that had operated with impunity for decades. At the same time, he became a champion of civil rights, using federal power to enforce desegregation in the Deep South. This dual fight earned him enemies on both sides. The Mafia, who saw RFK as a personal enemy. Segregationists, who despised his support for Martin Luther King Jr. and civil rights. And even elements of the intelligence community, who resented his influence and feared another Kennedy presidency. When President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, Robert was devastated. But by 1968, he had stepped forward, running for president himself. His campaign was built on hope, unity, and ending the Vietnam War. Crowds chanted his name, believing Bobby Kennedy could heal a wounded America. But with every rally, every victory, his list of enemies grew. And in the turbulent year of 1968, with cities burning from riots, Vietnam tearing the nation apart, and assassinations fresh in memory, many feared that history would repeat itself. RFK's rise was unstoppable, but so were the forces determined to silence him forever. Do you think Robert Kennedy's war on organized crime or his stance on Vietnam made him a bigger target? Comment below. And subscribe, because Chapter 3 will take you inside the Ambassador Hotel on the night of the shooting, where panic, bullets, and chaos changed history in seconds. Chapter 3. The Ambassador Hotel. The Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles was electric on the night of June 4, 1968. Robert F. Kennedy had just won the California Democratic primary, putting him one step closer to the White House. The ballroom was a sea of cheering supporters, balloons, and flashing cameras. Shortly after midnight, RFK stepped up to the podium. His speech was short, but it carried hope. Now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. The crowd roared. To many, it felt like destiny, another Kennedy marching toward the presidency. But behind the joy, there was tension. RFK's campaign knew the hotel was crowded, chaotic, and difficult to secure. Instead of exiting through the packed ballroom, Kennedy's team decided to lead him through the hotel's kitchen pantry, a narrow hallway lined with trays, dishes, and workers finishing their shifts. At 12:15 a.m., Kennedy entered the pantry, shaking hands as he walked. His smile was wide, his voice calm. People pushed forward to touch him, to be close to history. Then, gunfire. 6 shots rang out in rapid succession. Chaos erupted. Kennedy collapsed to the floor, blood spreading beneath his head. A young busboy, Juan Romero, rushed forward and cradled the senator's head, whispering, "You're going to be okay, Senator." Kennedy's eyes fluttered, his lips moved. His last words were reported as, "Is everyone all right?" Around him, others were screaming. 5 bystanders were wounded. In the confusion, a man was pinned against a steam table, his arm twisted as security wrestled away a revolver. His name was Sirhan Sirhan, a 24-year-old immigrant from Palestine. To the public, it seemed clear. The gunman had been caught red-handed. But in the years that followed, doubts would grow. Did Sirhan Sirhan truly act alone? Or was he just the man in front of the gun while someone else orchestrated Robert Kennedy's death? Do you believe Sirhan Sirhan was a lone assassin or part of something larger? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe, because Chapter 4 will reveal the shocking investigation, the trial, and the conspiracy theories that refuse to die. Chapter 4. The investigation. Sirhan Sirhan was taken into custody almost immediately after the shooting. The .22 caliber revolver was pried from his hand, and witnesses swore they saw him fire at least 3 times. On the surface, it seemed like an open and shut case, but the investigation soon revealed disturbing questions. Sirhan's motives. Sirhan, a 24-year-old Palestinian immigrant, told police he killed Kennedy because of the senator's strong support for Israel. Just days before the shooting, RFK had promised to send military aid to the country. To Sirhan, this was a betrayal of his people. Yet his explanations were erratic. Sometimes he claimed no memory of the shooting at all. Other times, he described it with chilling detail, as if he'd been compelled to act. The bullet mystery forensic evidence only deepened the doubts. Kennedy was shot from behind at close range, yet several witnesses insisted Sirhan had been standing in front of him. Even more puzzling, ballistic experts found inconsistencies between the number of bullets fired and the capacity of Sirhan's gun. Some claimed there must have been a second shooter, a theory that would fuel decades of conspiracy. The trial. Despite the questions, Sirhan Sirhan was convicted of first-degree murder in 1969 and sentenced to death, later commuted to life in prison when California briefly outlawed capital punishment. He remains incarcerated to this day, repeatedly denied parole. But outside the courtroom, doubts lingered. Was Sirhan a lone gunman driven by rage or a pawn in a larger plan to silence another Kennedy before he reached the presidency? The evidence closed the case in court, but in the court of public opinion, the questions never stopped. Do you think Sirhan Sirhan really acted alone, or do you believe a second gunman pulled the fatal trigger? Comment below. And subscribe, because Chapter 5 will uncover the legacy of Robert Kennedy's assassination, the conspiracy theories that haunt it, and how America lost not just a man, but a dream. Chapter 5. The Death of Hope. In the early hours of June 6, 1968, America woke to the devastating news. Robert F. Kennedy was dead. After 26 hours in critical condition at Good Samaritan Hospital, the 42-year-old senator succumbed to his injuries. The announcement came just 5 years after his brother, President John F. Kennedy, had been assassinated in Dallas. Once again, the nation mourned a Kennedy. And once again, the dream of hope and renewal seemed stolen by violence. A nation in mourning, tens of thousands lined the railroad tracks as RFK's funeral train carried his body from New York to Washington, D.C. Mourners stood in silence, waving flags, weeping, and placing flowers along the rails. For many, it wasn't just the death of a man, it was the death of a movement. Robert Kennedy had been a symbol of compassion and unity in one of America's darkest eras. He spoke against war, racial injustice, and poverty. He believed the country could heal its wounds, and now he was gone. The legacy and the questions. Sirhan Sirhan remained behind bars, but doubts about his guilt grew louder with time. Ballistics experts questioned whether all bullets came from Sirhan's gun. Witnesses insisted more shots were fired than the weapon could hold. And most mysteriously, Sirhan himself has claimed for decades that he has no memory of the shooting, fueling speculation of hypnosis or mind control. Conspiracy theories spread. Was Sirhan a patsy, manipulated to take the blame? Were there CIA or organized crime connections seeking to silence another Kennedy who threatened entrenched power? None of it has ever been proven. Yet, even today, many remain unconvinced that the full truth has ever been told. A lost future. Had Robert Kennedy lived, many believe he would have become president, potentially ending the Vietnam War earlier, reshaping American politics, and carrying forward his brother's unfinished vision. Instead, his death left a vacuum, one filled by cynicism, anger, and distrust of government that would define the coming decades. More than 50 years later, Robert F. Kennedy's assassination remains both a tragedy and a mystery, the silencing of a man who spoke of peace and the echo of a gunshot that still haunts the American conscience. Do you believe RFK's death was the act of one man or the result of a deeper conspiracy? Share your thoughts below. And subscribe, because our next story dives into another true case that changed America forever.